Hey, welcome back to the Behavioral Insights channel. I'm Dr. Lisa Brothers, and in today's video, I'm going to be breaking down 5 elements to long-term follow-through. So if you've ever tried to make a change and found maybe it was short-lived, it only lasted for a couple of weeks for you, and it left you feeling really discouraged and frustrated, then stick around because I'm going to share 5 different elements that can really be the difference between sticking with something for a couple of weeks versus sticking with something for years. So this is most applicable when change is self-initiated, so you're choosing. You get to a place where you decide that you're no longer going to tolerate whatever result you have in a certain area, and you're really ready to make a decision, to commit and make a change. So let's dive right in. The first of the 5 elements is having intense desire. So this goes beyond maybe the first level would be like, oh, it would be nice to make this particular change. And then you kind of move along the continuum to a place of, I want to make this change, but it's not necessarily real yet. And then you keep moving along that continuum, and when you've gotten to intense desire, it truly becomes a need to. Like, I need to make this change now. And so that brings us into the second element, which is having a really compelling reason to act on it now. So there's a sense of urgency there. So whether this is external circumstances, something going on in your life that is promoting this. So say, for example, if it was something in the area of health and wellness, and then suddenly you see somebody that you care about a lot get sick, or they have a health crisis, and then all of a sudden it builds this intense desire and this compelling reason to really act on it right now. So that's the second element. And then when we take these two together, what's happening is this is really driving what I call a worthiness belief. So the belief that it's worth the time, it's worth the effort, and it's worth the sacrifice involved, whatever that is perceived to be. When we are driving up that worthiness belief, it's going to support that long-term follow-through. But stick around, because the next 3 elements are really going to help support that further, and I think can even make or break whether you stick with something. So the third element is having an effective strategy, or the willingness to engage in some amount of trial and error to find an effective strategy, to figure it out. So you really have a level of determination where you're like, even if I don't have an effective strategy or I don't know the whole path, I'm very much willing to engage in trial and error to figure it out, to find what works for me and to forge that path. And this is something that I call a process belief. So when we are looking at sustaining follow through for long-term change, it's really important that we either believe that the strategy that we're following can produce results for us, can lead us to that outcome, or that we can find one. All right, and then moving into the 4th element, that's going to be having realistic expectations for the journey. When you decide and you commit, you can make a decision and commit to something in the short term pretty easily. And the difference really when you're talking about making a commitment over the long term is that you are recognizing up front that it's not going to be easy. You're inevitably going to run into challenges. It's not always going to be fun. But when you're ready to decide and commit to a long-term change, it's really a different level of commitment, because you're acknowledging that those challenges are likely to come up and that you're willing to engage with it. And so when you have a realistic expectation about the length and how challenging that journey might be, you're more likely to stick with something and follow through over the long term, versus if your expectations are that it's going to be pretty easy, it's not going to take very much time, and then you get into it and find that that's not the case, you're less likely to follow through. Okay, moving into the fifth element, and I really want to say this one is absolutely critical because our environment is so influential over the decisions and the actions that we take on a day-to-day basis. And so the fifth element is building in a supportive environment. Nobody else is responsible to do this for you. So you have to then figure out, what does a supportive environment look like if I am to pursue this change and follow through over the long term? And so I break this into two different categories. Supportive environment physically is probably what you think of first, and that can be anything from having a defined area to engage in the actions that would help move you closer to this goal, or it could be having ready access to different resources that you need. It can be looking at the response effort involved. So depending on what the goal is, if it's really a lot of work to even get started, it's going to be more difficult to make the decision to take aligned action in the moment, versus if you make that response effort very low and very easy, it's going to be so much more likely that you're going to follow through. And then some other things you want to think about too when it comes to a supportive physical environment is how many competing priorities are existing at that time in that environment, and distractions. So you want to minimize these up front, doing the work proactively to minimize the competing priorities and the distractions will go a long way in terms of boosting that follow through. And then I also think about a part of our supportive environment being social, and it's very, very powerful. So socially, I want you to think about who encourages and pushes you to grow, to improve, to do better, and is not afraid to give you feedback. That's a really important element, and I think a lot of people are not willing to do that. And so you really have to think about, who is it that I have already in my social network, and if I don't have that many people in this area, then do I need to expand my social network? Do I need to get in some different groups or meet some other people that can help kind of not only hold me accountable here, but give me real feedback that can help me improve and keep me showing up and engaged in the process? And then the other thing you can ask when it comes to a supportive social environment is thinking about what mentors or role models you can keep engaging with, even if you're not necessarily in a mentorship relationship with somebody. Can you learn from them in some way? Can you consume their books or podcasts or whatever it may be? Thinking about ways that you can continue to get that social influence in your life to help support long-term follow-through. And then the last thing I want you to think about here is if there are boundaries that are needed so that you can protect that time to engage in those actions that are going to keep on moving you towards that goal, supporting long-term follow-through. And so together, building up supportive physical and social environment is really going to help drive up the belief in your own capability, as well as the belief surrounding your identity and how congruent this change in these actions are with your identity. So the more that your physical and social environment really align with this particular outcome, the stronger those beliefs are going to be that are really going to carry forward and influence the actions and the results that you get as a part of that. So we'll just real quick go over from the top the 5 elements for long-term follow-through. Number 1, intense desire. Number 2, you want to have a really compelling reason to act on it now with some sense of urgency. Number 3 is having an effective strategy or just faith that you can figure one out, that you can find one. And 4 is having realistic expectations so that you can decide and commit on that basis. And then 5 is building up that supportive environment. And so there you have it. So 5 elements of long-term follow through. If you found this information valuable and you know anybody else who has been really struggling with follow through over the long term, then maybe you could share this video with them. And then also leave me a comment down below and let me know which one stood out for you. Which one have you struggled with the most?